Hey, good morning. Got some business lessons for you here today. This is a really good one, and it's kind of some of my techniques for how to communicate. I've been studying the author of an article for several years now, he's really a fantastic scholar. So I want to kind of jump into this one. So what we're talking about today is crisis communication techniques. So there's four techniques in this that I want to talk about just briefly today, but the things that are really important to understand how communication is going on in today's society. So we're going to take a look at these four things briefly here. This is from a Harvard Business School instructor, best-selling author Carmine Gallo. Recently, on the 17th, published an article in Harvard Business Review called "Crisis Communication Techniques." And it's really good. So Carmine Gallo also did another piece that you might remember several years ago that was about the communication and leadership techniques of Steve Jobs. So he talked about how he gave presentations, things like that. So you may remember seeing that, and it's really good. So and I'm going to post an article or post a link to this article down below. Actually, the article is finding the right words in a crisis. So it close. So here's something to think about. We're seeing all of these principles being used today. I don't know if you watch press releases, if you watch the interviews on the news channels, things like that, but you're seeing all of these things being put into play to try and calm down society as well as deliver messaging. And this is really fascinating when you start looking at the science behind it. The psychology behind it, and really what it does to calm the recipient or the consumer. We're all the consumer out here, and how leaders are using this. So you run a business, you're in business, things like that. Put this in your communication. This is really important. So this goes everywhere from New York Governor Cuomo. Talking about how he is doing certain things in New York, and he was talking about stay home, stop the spread, save lives. So this is a really important principle. Stay home, stop the spread, save lives. Sounds a lot better than shelter in place, doesn't it? So a reporter had asked him during the press conference, "Hey, so you want everybody to shelter in place?" He's like, "No, I want them to stay home, stop the spread, save lives." Why did he say that? Well, we've all been trained now that shelter in place has to do with like active shooter situations. So he's trying to reduce the stress on the recipient of that message by not calling it something that has a connotation of somebody running around killing people. So he's trying to reduce the stress and get people to say, "Oh, okay, I can do this," instead of "I'm stressed out by this." So it's really kind of an interesting way of looking at this, but it's ultimately what's going on. So keep an eye out on all the communication that's going on right now, and understand that when you're building out your communication in your business and you're talking to other people. So a couple other examples. Dr. Deborah Birx, White House's coronavirus response coordinator. Really, this lady can present like nobody's business. She is so good at the podium. And it's interesting when you watch the president's press releases, she's always there to talk. So she told a story. This is one of the principles. She told a story about her grandmother bringing home the flu virus that fatally infected her grandmother's mother. So her great grandmother during I guess the early 1900s or something like that. So it was, she brought home this flu virus from school and didn't even know it. So it's just kind of an analogy, telling a story. Stories engender our attention and our feelings, and we can relate to stories. This is one of these principles here. And then Dr. Anthony Fauci, we all know who Dr. Fauci is. He gets up and he really does an amazing job of simplifying his responses. People try to complicate responses a lot. They try to make them look really educated, things like that. He understands the simplicity is the delivery that is needed. So he's the director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease at National Institute of Health. And he repeatedly uses terms of three because he knows we remember terms of three. So if you think about this, so some of the things, this is a quote from the article. Fauci also stressed that Americans must continue to physically separate from one another by doing three things: staying 6 feet apart, limiting gatherings to 10 or fewer people, and avoiding mass interactions. So then he goes on to add three more, such as in restaurants, bars, and theaters. So he understands this pattern of three of how we're talking here. So this is a really interesting study in psychology and a study in business communication. These people have mastered this. And you should take a note of this and watch it, because this is really interesting when you start delivering this way. Deliver in messages of three. Deliver in short words. So here are the 4 key points from this Harvard Business Review article. First, replace long words with short ones. Nobody wants to be preached at by an academic type environment. Nobody wants to be lectured with long, extremely confusing or highly educated words, things like that. Make it simple. Make it simple. I've heard the term say, "Tell me like I'm 5." Tell me like I'm 5 years old. And ultimately, if you shorten your words up and you keep things simple, because you shouldn't have to use these incredibly long academic words in order to explain what you're doing. Let's keep it simple. Okay. Replace long words with short words. Find analogies. Again, that has to do with it's like this, or tell a story that we all may be able to put ourselves into. Personalize the crisis, the story piece. So, here's what I did. Here's what you may have experienced, things like that. And then observe the rule of three, so people remember, because they're going to take really 2 things are going to be taken away from any communication that you have. And this is a really important point. 1 is, what are those 3 things? And 2 is, what's the story behind this? They might not remember the situation. I remember a lot of different stories, but I don't necessarily remember the situation around them in my life, but I remember the stories. So think about that when you talk about this. So the formula is actually being used a lot, okay? It's being used a lot to calm people and give them direction. Think about that. So what this does also is, when we get a question asked of us, it opens a loop of fear. It opens a loop of fear because we don't know the answer. So what happens when somebody asks us a question that we don't know the answer to? We fill it with the worst case scenario in our heads. It's human nature. It's in our genetics to close the loop with fear. So we end up telling ourselves worst case scenario. So what we're doing here is, with these very simple answers that people can remember, we're closing this loop of fear. So think about that. It's up to us now. We have to communicate really well. Business leaders unite, okay? Business leaders unite. And let's tell a simple story, one that everybody can understand, one that's not scary, that everybody can walk around with. And that's pretty much what we need to be thinking about right now. So that's the business lesson for today. Remember these 4 points. Short words, not long words. Find analogies, personalize the crisis, and the rule of 3. Okay? And let's get going with building a fulfilling life here. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. Let's do something with it. Check out the article. There's a link below. You probably have to copy and paste it into your browser, but it's a great article. Short read, good information. Thanks for all you guys do. Love you. Be safe, be strong, be well, and I will catch you next time. See ya.